Welcome to the Financial Freedom Podcast, where we interview remarkable people and share strategies for mastering money and living a meaningful life. With your host, Grant Sabatier, creator of Millennial Money and author of Financial Freedom, a proven path to all the money you will ever need.
This episode is brought to you by Topia, the free financial independence tracking app that I designed to help you accelerate your journey to financial freedom. To learn more, search for Topia in the App Store and on Google Play, or visit topia-app.com. That's topia-app.com. Everybody, welcome to the show. Today I have Tanya Dalton, who is the author of On Purpose, The Busy Women's Guide to an Extraordinary Life of Meaning and Success. A couple weeks ago, I was invited to be on Tanya's podcast, and we had such a great conversation that I wanted to bring her onto this show and flip the mic and ask her some deep questions. So thanks for joining the show, Tanya.
Oh, I'm excited to be here. We had so much fun on my show and then after my show.
Yeah, I feel like we talked for a really long time.
We did. It was great.
So can you tell the audience a little bit about who you are and your work?
Yeah, I'm happy to because I think I have a really interesting path because I think a lot of people think that the path is supposed to be like this perfectly straight line of you are here and then you are there. And my line has been very twisted and turned and curved in every which direction. So, I was a teacher and got married, had my son, decided I was going to be a stay-at-home mom, and I thought that was kind of the path for me. And I had a conversation with my husband. He was working for Fortune 500 companies at the time doing international marketing. So he has his MBA, and he would go and he would literally buy a ticket called the Around the World ticket. He would leave our home in Dallas, fly all the way around the world, touching almost every continent. So he'd be gone like 3 or 4 weeks at a time. And one afternoon, my phone rang. It was the end of my day. And I knew it was him calling at the beginning of his day. We had this kind of system where we would talk in the morning and the evening. And I get on the phone and I start telling him all the things that the kids are doing. And my kids were really young at the time. And he got really quiet. And I said, "Are you okay?" And he said, "I'm missing everything. I'm missing all the moments. I'm missing the milestones. I'm missing it all." And I said, "Oh, no, you're not." But I could tell it really tugged on him. It really pulled on him. And so I hung up my phone and I stood in my bright yellow kitchen that day and I made a big, bold decision. I decided I was going to grow a business to absorb his MBA income and have him come work alongside of me so we could have the freedom that we really wanted, which was a big decision for somebody who had zero business experience. I never even took a business course in college, which is crazy. So I sat down, I mapped out how I was going to make it work. And within about a year, I was able to make that goal happen. So my husband started working with me in 2009. I was able to absorb his MBA income, and it was fabulous. We love that. That's what allowed us to move to Asheville, North Carolina. If we want freedom, let's get some location freedom in there, right? So why not live where you want to live instead of waiting till you retire? Moved to Asheville in 2012. And in 2013, I looked at my husband and I said, "I love you. I love working with you, but I don't love what we're doing. I'm not really feeling like I'm making the impact that I want to make in the world." I mean, keep in mind, I used to be a teacher. Teachers are all about making a difference, right? And so he said, "Okay, what do you want to do?" And I was like, yeah, I don't know." So it was a really scary time because I knew I wanted to close my business. And that was the sole income for our family. It paid our bills. It fed our kids the 3 meals a day that they do enjoy eating. It paid for everything, the car payment, the mortgage, the lifestyle, the vacations, all of those things. And yet, when I figured out that there were three things I was really passionate about, I really love empowering women. I really love teaching. Once a teacher, always a teacher. And I love productivity. I love that that's what allowed me to make that dream happen, right? And bring my husband on board. So out of those three passions, I created my purpose, really my cathedral, I like to call it. That was my cathedral of what I wanted to do. And that was opening up Inkwell Press, a company that was really focused on redefining productivity. So we went without income for about 6 to 7 months, buckled down and really made things work for us. The day before we opened up shop, I said to my husband, "This is either going to be amazing or we're going to be living in our car under a bridge." I'm not sure which. And first day opened up, launched the storefront online, and we had 500 orders on opening day. And I knew,
Wow.
okay, wow, it's going to happen. Within 18 months, we were able to scale to 7 figures with only 3 employees because we were really laser focused. We understood what it was we wanted to do, and we were really conscious with how we used our time. And out of that grew the podcast, which is an extension of how much I love to teach and help empower people. And out of that came the offers from publishing houses asking me to write books. And so now I have published 2 books with HarperCollins, and it's just been kind of one of those crazy journeys where if you had told me this is where I'd be when I was standing in that bright yellow kitchen all those years ago, I would have told you were crazy. And yet I love where my life is.
And what was that business that you came up with in your bright yellow kitchen?
Yeah, well, it's kind of an interesting business because keep in mind, and this is totally going to date me. When I had my kids, it was, 2003, 2006. So there was no iPhones. There was no way to carry pictures of your kids. So people would say like, "Oh, can I see pictures of your kids?" when I was out and about. And I was like, "Listen, you're lucky I showered today, so I don't have pictures of my kids." I wanted to have a way that I could carry those pictures with me. So I started embedding them into heirloom quality jewelry. So I
Cool.
would take their photographs and I would embed them. So I started working with photographers and doing wholesale photography, where photographers would basically sell this heirloom quality jewelry to their clients.
Wow, that's a very cool business, very niche, very specific.
It's super niche.
So you've taken some big risks, it sounds like, launching that business and then, taking the 6 to 7 month period when you transition to Inkwell. How do you think about risk in your life?
I think, people fear risk. Every day is a risk. Crossing the road is a risk, right? Stepping into your shower and not slipping and hitting your head, that's a risk. It's all about making educated risks, right? And really understanding who you are and where you want to go. I think the why is what's important behind anything you're doing, whether we're talking about financial freedom, whether we're talking about starting a company, whether it's becoming a parent, which I know is on your list of things you're doing this year, Grant. Why am I doing this? Because the why is what's going to drive you. And I think the big thing, and this is one of the things I talk about in my latest book, is a lot of times we think that where we are now and where we want to go is this chasm, like the Grand Canyon. And that risk seems really big. Like we're trying to figure out how we can jump across the Grand Canyon. When really, if we just put one foot in front of the other, step by step, day by day, we can make our way down the canyon walls, across the canyon, and up the other side. You can actually cross the Grand Canyon in a day, right? But we get caught up in the big movements and in the becoming financially free or in, having the 7 figure business, and we get daunted. So it's about taking these tiny steps and building self-trust, building the confidence in yourself that you can do this, whatever it is you're wanting to do. And as that confidence builds with each step, the steps get bigger and they get faster. And the next thing you know, the steps are now running and leaping and jumping and all those things.
Yeah, I like that incremental approach. One of the things I always struggled with, certainly in my 20s, was finding my why, and I felt like because I was a smart person and I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, that there was ultimately something wrong. So, in addition to kind of the incremental approach, if someone doesn't know their why, if they don't know really what makes them happy, if they haven't taken the time to even think through that or figure that out, what are a few steps that someone can take to start moving in that direction to figure out really what makes them feel alive?
Yeah, I love this question because I do think that's what stymies people. It's like when my husband said, "What do you want to do?" And I'm like, yeah, no idea, right? Because you really have to stop and kind of do an assessment of who am I and where do I want to go. And the truth is, your why has been with you all along. It's just had different iterations and different versions, and it changes and it shifts as your priorities shift and change. But some of the ways you can really dive in, and one of my favorite ways is really looking backwards. You have to look backwards in order to move forwards. And a lot of times your why is hidden in your childhood. Because when you were a kid, anything is possible, right? Nothing is impossible. So when you were a kid, what was it you wanted to be when you grew up? Did you want to be, somebody who worked in the fire department? Or did you want to be a teacher or the president? Or maybe you wanted to be Wonder Woman. So you think, well, how is my why buried in being wanting to be Wonder Woman? But it's, why did you want to be Wonder Woman? Was it because she stood for truth and justice? Was it because she helped people in need? Was it because she inspired a generation of young girls? What was it that really got you fired up? and even diving into what were the tasks and the things, the activities you did that you loved. Not the things that your mom dragged you to, like the piano lessons or whatever it was, but what were the things that you got really fired up about? Maybe it was, playing softball. Okay, well, maybe being a professional athlete is not is not your why, but why did you love softball? Was it being outside? Was it moving your body? Was it being on a team? What was it that you really loved? And start diving into some of those things that you really loved as a child before that heavy cape of adulthood kind of fell on your shoulders and all of a sudden you had to worry about paying the rent or paying the mortgage or doing those things. Diving into who we were in the past really can enlighten us on who we want to be and moving forward.
So I want to pivot a little bit to the productivity side because I've always struggled with daily journaling and goal setting and planning. And I often find that even setting goals or mapping out a to-do list for my day ends up being sort of too restrictive in a way. It doesn't allow me to be creative. I know there's so many different types of people, and there are goal setters and there are non-goal setters, and there are people who try to eke out every second of their day, and then other people who like to create open space. I think like a lot of things in life, we certainly all go through phases. I tend to find that my biggest productivity hack was just creating space in my day to do nothing, and that's when things really end up showing up. So I used to be one of these, I'm going to pack everything that I can, appointment to appointment to appointment, and then I realized if I can just leave 2 or 3 hours open in my day, that's when new ideas come. That's when I end up being able to relax. It's very productive and very generative. Can you talk about, since you're literally an expert and have written books on the topic of productivity, what are the limits of productive planning and goal setting? Where do they tend to fall short?
Yeah, well, first of all, I believe that goals are not the goal. I think we get really caught up in what the goals are, right? And I think one of the big mistakes we make a lot of times is we're not setting the right goals. We're setting the goals based off what everybody else is doing, looking at everybody else's metrics for success. And we don't take the time to really define what success looks like for us. And I think that's really important for us to do. I think that the problem that we have a lot of times with goal setting is we think that happiness lies on the other end of this finish line. That once I accomplish X, then I'll be happy. Once I hit the six-figure mark, then I'll be happy. Once I do these things, then I'll be happy, right? And what happens is you get to the goal and there's this short, like, oh, amazing high, followed by a, okay, now what? It's actually called the goal setting paradox. And it's something that's really fascinating if you study it in Olympic athletes. You see this increased, like, measure of happiness right after they go to the Olympics. And then right afterwards, there is a lot of depression because they don't know what to do next. So, really, it's about not setting the goals. It's looking at the cathedral, looking far off. This is what I call cathedral thinking. And I call it cathedral thinking because it's based off the idea that in like the 1200s, the 1100s, these architects and planners and artisans, they plan these beautiful cathedrals that have stood thousands of years, right? But they knew they weren't going to be finished in their own lifetime. The Duomo in Florence, Italy took 500, 600 years to build, but they started it knowing with the end in mind that this was so much bigger than them. This was their legacy. And if we look at this cathedral, this thing that we want to do far off in the future, it seems really daunting, kind of like that Grand Canyon we talked about. So I like to use a process called wayfinding, which is based off of how the ancient Pacific Islanders traveled across the ocean, vast, vast distances without GPS or iPhones. So basically, we look at your cathedral. Here you are today, and here's where you want to go. So that is your potential, where you could possibly go, right? This is your potential 10, 20 years down the road. Well, let's back it up a little bit and let's ask ourselves what's possible in 3 to 5 years to get us to that cathedral. So if this is what's possible, let's back it up even more. What's practical? What could I do practically in the next 12 to 18 months, right? But that's still pretty far away. If this is what's practical, let's back it up and decide, what do I need to prioritize? What do I need to do in the next 3 months, the next 6 months, the next 9 months? Those are really your goals. But your goals are just these little tiny landmarks getting you to that big vision that you have, this big, bright, beautiful future that you dream about. It's taking those ideas and backing them up so they're aligned for something bigger. Financial freedom, that is a cathedral, right? But it's not going to happen overnight. Let's make some milestones and decide what do we need to do to make that happen. Back it up. Start with that 10-year, 20-year plan, back it up 3 to 5, back it up to a year, and then back it up to a couple of months. And all of a sudden, your goals are so much easier because they're tied to something bigger, and that creates momentum. So I think that's one of the biggest things with goal setting that I think people don't do is they don't take the time to really think about, where do I want to go? Why do I want to do this?
Yeah, there's kind of this balancing between the rational mind and the intuition. One of the things I see a lot of people struggling with is that they'll set up those systems similar to what you're talking about. They'll spend their day doing a lot of things and and probably not enough time thinking about how it makes them feel. So I often see that people are really successful, but they're 2 years down the road into a business that doesn't make them feel alive, that they feel stuck in. Success itself can be a tough place to be if you're not in a career that you like. I see this often with doctors and lawyers and, professionals who invest in a massive amount of time in their education and take a lot of these steps and build these businesses. And then they get to a point where they're still unfulfilled and unhappy. How can someone best check in with themselves along this journey to make sure that they're making the right decisions for themselves?
I love this question because I think you're right. That's the same thing that happened to me with my first business, where I realized I was waking up each day thinking, I have to go to work or I've got to do these things. And there wasn't any of that joy in it. So it did take creating some very intentional unstructured time. I am a big advocate for blocking in unstructured time in every day because I think that's so important, the thinking time, right? But we need to do that on a regular basis every year. I do it every quarter for myself in my personal life and in my business because I think it's really important to stop and check in and go, hold on, where am I? Okay, where do I want to go? Right? So I talk about this process that I think is really helpful. So I do this every 3 months, so every quarter. But if you even just do this once a year, it's really impactful. It's called the 3 A's. The first A is to acknowledge, okay, here's where I am today. Here's what this looks like. Just, you know, just as an observer. In meditation, we talk about being the observer, right? And looking without judgment. This is not a time to beat yourself up. This is not a time to say, why am I not here? Just acknowledge where you are. And then get to the second A, assess. Do I like where I am? Do I want to be here? Is this where I want to be? Or do I really want to be over there? Do I really like something else better? Right? And then we get to the third A, which is adjust. Okay, do we need to make some adjustments? Do we need to shift and change what we're doing? If we like where we are, what kind of things do we want to think we want to do next? What kind of adjustments do we need to make for that? If we don't like where we are, what do we need to adjust and change to go somewhere else? And really asking that question, why, is incredibly powerful. In the book, I talk about a process that I think is really important that you can use called the fifth why. And I love the fifth why because it's so easy to do. You can do it while you're in the shower or driving your car. It's literally asking the question why 5 times. So if you notice, like, oh, I feel so frustrated at work, you ask yourself why, right? The first why, you're going to go shallow. You're going to just be like, well, I'm frustrated because, I didn't get the promotion at work. Okay, let's ask yourself why again. Why didn't I get the promotion at work? Well, I didn't get the promotion at work because my boss said I wasn't ready. Okay, let's ask why again. That's our third why. Why didn't my boss think I was ready? My boss didn't think I was ready because I haven't taken the advanced certification that I needed. Okay, here's our fourth why. Why didn't I take the advanced certification? Because I don't feel like I have the time and I'm exhausted at the end of the day. Okay, why are you exhausted at the end of the day? Because I'm piling too many things on my to-do list. I'm running myself ragged. I'm saying yes to too many things. Do you see how we've gotten from, I just don't like my job, to, okay, the real problem is we need to put some boundaries on who we're saying yes to and how we're spending our time so we can prioritize the things that are going to make us happier at work or whatever it is. But that fifth why works for everything. It works for if you have a business and there's some kind of stopgap in your process. It works for understanding what you're really grateful for. It works to tell you what's keeping you and holding you back. I use the fifth why with my kids when I see them struggling and it gets to the root of their problem or what the root cause is. And when you understand what the root cause is, you can pull it up. And that's incredibly powerful. But isn't that so easy? Ask why 5 times. That's it.
I really love that. I love how you're just taking these very large problems at the level of purpose and identity and meaning, and creating very practical processes for which people can unpack why they feel a certain way, and helping to give people the language in order to do that. I want to ask a little bit about limiting beliefs. I chatted with Tony Robbins on the show about this. Tony's one of these guys who's more, you can be everything, you can do and create more and be more. He's obviously an inspirer of people sort of taking action. But one of the things in my own life is just last August, I realized at the age of 36 that I'd accomplished all of my life goals. I had a best-selling book. I was a multimillionaire. I have a happy family. I love where I live. And it was at that point that I was very peaceful and very happy, but I wondered if I was thinking too small. And if I was thinking too small because of the container in which I grew up in, which becoming a millionaire, pretty much all that I thought about for many years, because how I grew up with parents who had very little, that was the goal. That's the sole focus, or retirement's the sole focus. And once I accomplished all these goals, not only did I not have any, but I felt like I'd underestimated myself in a lot of ways, and that the talent that I had and all the hard work that I put in really brought me to this place where it's like the edge of my thinking. It was like I reached the edge of the box that I'd grown up in. Can you talk about your views on limiting beliefs and how people can expand beyond the box that they're living in based on kind of where they grew up and where they're at when they're listening to this show?
Yeah. Well, I think we all have limiting beliefs. So let's just first of all normalize that everybody has limiting beliefs, no matter what you think they're doing on social media or what it looks like on the outside. Inside, we're all feeling like we're playing dress up in our parents' clothes. Like, wait, am I really a grown up? I still have moments, and I have like one in college where I'm like, how am I a grown up? Because I
Mm-hmm.
swear I'm like, still a kid. So, what's interesting too is that limiting beliefs are steeped in fear, right? And our fear really comes from one of three stories. Cognitive behavior development therapists talk about this. There are really three stories that we choose to tell ourselves. There's one predominant story for each one of us. I am unlovable, I am worthless, or I am helpless. Every fear that we have, whether it's fear of disappointment or fear of failure or fear of stepping out and being authentically ourselves, or fear of anything, comes from one of those three stories. So really asking yourself, which one of these stories is it for me? For me, it is, I am unlovable, that I worry that I'm going to be abandoned, that I'm going to be left. I don't know where the story comes from. I do kind of. We don't need to get into my psychological therapy sessions here. But when I understand that a lot of my fear comes from that story of I am unlovable, I can I can take that and I can shift it on its head. And I can start to question, why does this make me feel like I'm unlovable? My husband's is I am worthless. He worries about being worthy and being, worth what people do for him or what he's offering into the world. I am helpless allows you to understand, okay, I need to see where I can do things instead of focusing on where I can't, right? So understanding that. And I think one of the best ways to really pull up and understand what your limiting beliefs are, or rather, because we all have more than one, is to stop and acknowledge. And that's the problem, because a lot of times we don't realize they're in there. They're just soundtracks running in our head on a loop, right? So what I tell people is pay attention to how you feel. Your body will tell you before your mind does that there's something going on. So, for example, for me, whenever I was doing launches or things like that, I would get this pit in my stomach and I would get a headache. Okay, those are not positive things. So let me stop and ask the question, why am I feeling this way? Right? And then I can go through that fifth why activity and really uncover, why am I feeling this way? But pay attention to what your body's telling you. If you're getting an upset stomach every time you're meeting with a person, why are you getting the upset stomach? What is it that's triggering that? Or if you're getting a tension headache, or you're getting a migraine, or you're getting this pain somewhere in your body will tell you. And that is your body saying, hey, stop and ask me what's going on. And what happens is when you ask yourself why, you hear the story you're telling in your head. So for me, it was, no one's going to show up for you. You have to do everything on your own. If you don't do this, nobody else is going to do it, right? Which made me feel like I was my own island. not like the fruity cocktail kind of island, right? More like the Tom Hanks with Wilson kind of island, which wasn't a good feeling. But if I didn't pay attention to my body, which is my intuition, letting me know, right? If I don't stop and acknowledge it and ask myself why, I'll never get to that limiting belief to understand what it is. Because then I understood when I did that fifth why exercise, I understood it was at its heart that I was afraid that people were not going to show up for me, that I didn't really belong. And so I reframed it. And reframing is not just saying the opposite. I can't just say, well, people are going to show up for me. You know why? I'm not going to believe it because everything in my fiber in my being is saying, you don't belong. No one's going to show up for you. So I had to reframe it with a truth, right? I had to turn that lie into a truth. So for me, when I start to feel that feeling with a launch, I know that I have to say to myself, people will show up for me if I ask clearly for what I want and if I ask the right people and it's the right time for them, right? So I added in these extra layers that I have to do in action. I can't just say that this is to turn this lie into a truth. The truth has to have an action behind it. And part of the action is asking clearly for what I want because I realized I was just assuming people would help me. Or I would just like very vaguely, we could say passive aggressively, be like, well, I got this thing going on. Maybe you could help. And they weren't like paying attention, right? Or they weren't fully engaged. They can't read my mind. So when I shifted that whole idea, that lie, that limiting belief into a truth with an action, asking clearly the right people when it's the right time for them, it shifted everything for me. So it really is, again, that fifth why is incredibly powerful. Why? So easy.
Is there anything that scares you? Is there any limiting belief that you have that you're still working on?
Oh, well, we're always working on something, right? I mean, that story of I am unlovable, that's with me always, right? So I'm always thinking about it, I'm always worrying, but understanding that that's my story makes it so much easier to dive into it. So I think part of the work is really acknowledging I'm human. And you know what? I'm imperfect. I'm supposed to be imperfect. I'm made with flaws for a reason, and that's okay. I think for me, the biggest difference for me has been that I used to be somebody who found my worth in my accomplishments. I was an overachiever, right? As I know you were, Grant, as I know many of your listeners and my listeners as well on my podcast are the same way. And so I found my value on checking things off. And I had to reframe that for myself. And part of that was when I reframed productivity. Productivity is not about doing more, it's doing what's most important. Well, if we're doing what's most important, we have to spend time understanding what's most important. So creating unstructured time, having time in my day, like this morning, I haven't really worked on anything. So we're talking right now, it's like, 10:45 in the morning and I sat outside, I had some tea, I listened to the birds, I looked at the mountains in my backyard, I kind of puttered around the house a little bit. The old me would have been like, what are you doing? What are you getting done? What's happening? What's happening? Got to check some things off. And so it is this whole shifting of, okay, what's important? What was important to me this morning was spending time with my husband. I call that $1 million moment, right? My $1 million minutes are the time that I, have in my day, all day throughout my day. But if they were gone tomorrow, I'd pay $1 million to get them back. If I couldn't have tea outside with my husband, I would pay $1 million to get that back. Like if he was gone tomorrow. So really shifting and understanding what is important. That time with him was really important. Some time for me today, just meditating and sitting outside and listening to the birds, that was important. Yeah, I didn't check anything off my list, but I feel so much better.
I think Asheville is one of my favorite places on earth. It's just so absolutely gorgeous there in the mountains. And I used to play in a folk band and we traveled through there. It's just so wonderful. So I'm like literally envisioning you sitting out looking at a bunch of pine trees, on a mountain with like the fresh air. It sounds absolutely gorgeous. So you recently sold your business that you had grown. Can you talk a little bit about kind of that process and that emotional transition? As I went through this as well around a similar time, and A lot of emotions wrapped up in building a business and then selling it and then getting comfortable with the space that's left over afterwards. Can you share a little bit about that process and what it made you feel and how you've worked through it?
Yeah, well, okay. So here's a question for your listeners. Have you ever had a moment in your day where you have the things checked off your list that you needed to get checked off, and you have like 5, 10 minutes, and there's nothing on your list that you have to get done, and you're unsettled? Like, okay, something has to be wrong. Wait, hold on. What did I do wrong here? Because I shouldn't have these 10 minutes, right? It's that being unsettled in that openness, and it's funny because as you shift and as you make any major life shift, there is this kind of unsettling that happens, that maybe there's extra space or time or whatever it is, and it feels uncomfortable. It feels uncomfortable because you've stepped out of your comfort zone of overachieving, right? Of checking the things off the list. And so you have to give yourself permission to feel uncomfortable. It's okay that you feel uncomfortable, but what do I want to do? And when's the last time I asked myself that question? What do I want to do? Right? And I think that's really important anytime you're making a major life shift or a major change in our lives, is there's going to be that discomfort and stepping out of that. So, for me, it was really important that I'm still a very active part of my company. I'm still the face of it, and I still am actively involved in the decision making. But I like to think of it as I sent my kid off to college, right? Like all the day in and day out kind of thing. So last year I sent my kid to college. Jack went to college as a freshman, which was a whole transition for our family. And my business went to college. It went on to someone else who's ready to take it to the next level that I didn't want to take it to. Right? I'm not interested in running a gigantic company with a huge team and all those things. I'm interested in freedom. Freedom is the new currency as far as I'm concerned. Lifestyle freedom, time freedom, financial freedom, all those freedoms, right? I didn't want that. And so I built this beautiful thing. I raised this beautiful kid, and now it's time for them to spread their wings and move on to the next step. And so there is a lot of peace with that, to be honest with you. And it's funny because it happened concurrently with my son, my oldest, and my business at the same time. Yeah, I had this beautiful moment. I think I shared it with you after we recorded my episode, Grant, with my son, where he went to college this past year. So he just has wrapped up his freshman year. And he's my nervous Nelly. He's my one who's always been scared about, like, what if I don't know what I want to go to college for? What if I get a major? What if I major in something and then I don't use it for my career? Which I was like, well, honey, you'll be like 99% of the people out in the world, so you're fine. But he's my nervous Nelly. He's always been really worried. And so last year when he graduated early because of COVID. He actually graduated in the carpool lane of his high school, which was a crazy experience. And so he said, I want to work on my confidence. I want to feel better about who I am. So he and I worked together to do some little activities and exercises to build his confidence. And on the day that we took him over to High Point University, which is where he goes to school, it was really, really hard. We moved him in the dorms. I'm trying to keep myself together, try not to break down. I mean, this is the moment, from the moment your child is born to the first day of kindergarten or the first day of preschool even, or you're thinking about this moment. One day I'm going to have to let them go, right? They're going to spread their wings. And every time it feels so emotional. And there you are the day of letting your kid go, right? So we have the convocation and we're standing outside of his dorm, and I'm trying to hold it together. My daughter's trying to hold it together. My husband's trying to hold it together. We're like, be strong, right? We're hugging him. And he goes, Mom, I'm ready. And so he turned and he walked in the dorm and he didn't look back. And Grant, that was the greatest moment I've had of my life. Honestly, of all the things I've accomplished, was that boy felt so confident stepping into that building, stepping into adulthood, that all the work I had done in the trenches of motherhood, right? And there's a lot of trenches. There's a lot of things that happen with days where you question what you're doing and why you're doing it. It culminated in that one moment where you're like, oh my God, he's feeling good. And I was a part of that. Whether we're talking about selling a company or raising a kid or whatever it is you're dreaming of, I want to gift that moment to people, because if I could bottle that up and sell it, I could make billions, because it was amazing. It is, all the work leads to this, right? And that's true in all things we do in life. What is it you want to do? What is your cathedral? One of my cathedrals was obviously getting my kids where they felt confident as adults that they could go off into the world. And I saw it happen. And that is an amazing thing.
Such a beautiful story. So I have one last question for you. Someone's listening to this. We don't know who they are. We don't know where they are. We don't know what they're feeling in this moment, what their story is. But perhaps something they've heard here has stirred an energy in them or a spark where now they believe perhaps that something that wasn't possible could be possible. What advice would you give that person who now is waking up in their own life and wants to take that first step to building a life that they truly love?
I would say, honestly, don't get caught up in the big giant leaps. Think about what's a small action step you can do today. I think a great place to start is with that fifth why activity. So I would challenge you today, not tomorrow, not next week, not a month from now. Today, take 15 minutes. You can gift yourself 15 minutes. I promise you can find 15 minutes somewhere in your day. I want you to take that 15 minutes and I want you to go sit somewhere that makes you happy. And I want you just to take the first few minutes just to breathe, just to focus on your breathing and allow your mind to clear out. Let all those things you're thinking about out, write them down on a sheet of paper if you need to. And then I want you to ask yourself the question, why? Why am I where I am today? And ask it 5 times. You don't need more than 15 minutes. Take the first 5 minutes just to breathe, right? Or just to enjoy where you're sitting. But gift yourself that time, because when you understand your why, it's going to be incredibly powerful. And that's going to get that momentum started. It really is tiny, itty bitty, minuscule steps that get the second step happening, that get the third step happening. And before you know it, the life that you're dreaming about, the life that you really want, it's available to you, but you have to take action. And the action can be just that, 15 minutes today. So I'd love for you to do that right now.
I love that. I love that. Thank you for coming on the show. Everyone, this is Tanya Dalton. She's the author of On Purpose, The Busy Woman's Guide to an Extraordinary Life of Meaning and Success, available everywhere books are sold. Also, check out her first book, The Joy of Missing Out, which was named one of the top business books of the year by Fortune magazine. She also has an extremely popular podcast called The Intentional Advantage. You can check me out on an upcoming episode where the mic is turned onto me. Tanya, gosh, this was just as inspiring as I had hoped it would be. Thank you for taking the time out of your beautiful tea-filled morning, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and wonderful weekend. Is there anywhere else people can find you, and how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so the best place to find me is tanyadalton.com. I am not on social media. I've made an intentional decision not to be on social media. So you can find links to my podcast, my books there, as well as I do a lot of speaking as well. You could also, after this episode is done, you can pause it and go do a search for The Intentional Advantage, and you'll find my podcast episodes there. I think we're on episode 260 something. And we have a fabulous episode with Grant as a guest that you'll be able to listen to.
Thanks for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it, please leave a review, and I would love your help getting the word out. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next week.